He had lost everything, until she arrived with a heart full of hope. The frontier town lay quiet beneath a thick blanket of snow. Icicles hung from the eaves of shuttered shops, and the streets, empty except for drifting flurries, seemed frozen in time. Inside a small timber cabin at the edge of town, a single fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm golden light across the worn wooden walls. The smell of burning pine mingled with the faint scent of dried herbs, and soft rugs muffled the creaks of the floor. Kneeling by the hearth was the cowboy, his broad shoulders hunched over slightly, dark hair dusted with soot from the fire. His eyes, normally sharp and steady, carried the weight of too many lonely winters and nights spent staring into emptiness. Beside him, clinging to his arm, was his daughter, a bright-eyed girl of 10, her small face illuminated by the dancing flames. She held a tattered doll in one hand, the other tightly wrapped around her father's coat. The firelight painted them in shades of gold and amber, creating a sense of warmth and intimacy that had been absent from their lives for far too long. Outside, snow swirled gently against the frosted windows, each flake glinting like a tiny promise of hope. Yet the cabin felt incomplete, its warmth and comfort were tempered by the absence of laughter that had once filled its walls. Then she appeared. Through the frosted window, he noticed her figure first. A young woman standing just beyond the doorway, her hair lightly dusted with snow, wrapped in a sky-blue velvet coat and matching scarf. She carried herself with quiet determination, shoulders squared against the cold, yet her gaze softened as it fell on the father and daughter inside. There was something in her eyes that made him look twice, a spark of life, of warmth, of possibility he hadn't felt in years. His daughter noticed her too. The girl pressed closer to him, wide-eyed, hesitant but curious. "Papa, who is she?" she whispered, her voice barely above the crackle of the fire. I don't know, little one," he replied, his voice rough but low, careful not to startle her. "Let's just watch for a moment." The woman took a step closer, snow crunching softly under her boots. Her expression was gentle, almost reverent, as if she could feel the life and loss within the cabin walls without even stepping inside. She lifted a gloved hand and gave a small, tentative wave. The cowboy's heart, so long buried under grief, twitched unexpectedly. Outside, the snowflakes swirled around her, catching the light from the cabin and giving her a faint halo of gold. He realized that, in all the years since his wife had passed, he had never noticed how someone could stand against the cold and yet radiate warmth, hope, and quiet courage all at once. Inside, the daughter's curiosity won over her hesitation. She released his arm just enough to peek out the window, her small nose pressed against the frost. "She looks nice," she said softly. The cowboy didn't respond immediately. He wasn't sure what to say. Words felt inadequate for the sudden stirrings in his chest, the faint tug of something he had thought he'd lost forever. But the way the woman stood, so poised and kind, gave him an unexpected sense of relief. Perhaps not all strangers brought danger. Perhaps, just perhaps, some carried hope. She lingered there for a few moments, silently observing, as if weighing the courage to step inside. Finally, she lifted her head, took a small breath, and knocked on the wooden door. The sound echoed softly, a gentle percussion that seemed to awaken something dormant in the cabin. The father rose slowly, brushing ash from his coat. "Come in," he called, his voice more confident than he felt. The door opened, letting in a puff of cold air that carried the scent of snow and pine. The woman stepped inside cautiously, her boots leaving small wet prints on the wooden floor. Her eyes took in the fire, the rustic furniture, the blankets draped over benches, and finally, the small girl who had now moved to hide behind her father. "Hello," she said softly, removing her gloves and letting the scarf slip slightly to reveal her face. I heard there might be work here, as a teacher. I thought, maybe I could help." The cowboy studied her carefully. There was something honest in her tone, a quiet strength. He noted the way she didn't try to hide her nerves, the way her eyes still held warmth despite the cold outside. Something about her presence made the cabin feel less empty, more like home. His daughter peeked out from behind him, then slowly stepped forward, curiosity winning over shyness. Are you really a teacher? She asked, eyes bright. Yes, the woman replied, kneeling slightly so she could meet the girl's gaze. I love teaching. I love children. And I think we could be friends. For a long moment, the cabin was silent except for the fire's crackle and the distant whistle of the wind outside. Then, as if breaking a spell, the daughter stepped forward, holding out her small hand. I'm Emily, she said shyly. I'm Clara, the woman replied, taking her hand gently, letting it rest in hers. It's very nice to meet you, Emily. The father watched them, a warmth creeping into his chest he hadn't felt in years. Something inside him stirred, a fragile but undeniable hope. Perhaps this winter, this Christmas, wouldn't be so lonely after all. Perhaps, with her there, the cabin would once again be filled with laughter, joy, and the simple, quiet magic of family. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but it no longer felt cold or harsh. Inside the cabin, by the fire, a new chapter was beginning, a chapter filled with warmth, connection, and the gentle glow of Christmas hope. The fire crackled warmly, throwing soft golden light across the cabin walls. Outside, snow continued to fall in a quiet, relentless swirl, coating the ground in a thick, sparkling blanket. The cowboy, whose name was Luke, leaned against the wooden table, watching Clara as she knelt beside Emily, his daughter. The girl's small hands were tucked carefully in Clara's, and for the first time in months, Luke saw a smile on his daughter's face that felt real, not forced. Clara's voice was soft but confident as she began asking Emily about her favorite stories, the ones she liked to read by the fire. Emily's eyes brightened as she talked, pointing at a worn book lying on the rug. This one, she said eagerly. It's my favorite. We can read it together. Clara nodded, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Of course, she said warmly. She opened the book and began reading aloud, her voice carrying the story into the corners of the cabin. The way she animated the characters, her gentle inflections, and expressive eyes held Emily's attention completely. Luke watched, a small, almost shy smile tugging at his lips. It had been years since he had seen his daughter so engaged, so happy. He had been consumed by grief and the loneliness of life on the frontier after his wife's passing. He had worried about raising Emily alone, feared that the small cabin would grow cold and empty without the laughter of another voice. Yet here, in the flickering firelight, Clara's presence seemed to melt away the walls he had built around his heart. Papa, she's really nice, Emily whispered, glancing up at him between pages. Her tiny hand reached for his, and Luke gave it a gentle squeeze. Can we keep her? Luke chuckled softly, shaking his head. We'll see, little one, he said, though inside he knew the answer before he even spoke the words. He could feel the subtle shift in the cabin, the way the warmth seemed fuller, richer, with Clara there. After the story, Clara suggested they make some cocoa. Emily's face lit up with excitement, and Luke felt a pang of nostalgia, remembering simpler Christmases from his own childhood. He helped fetch water from the small pump by the cabin, while Clara gathered a few herbs and spices, her hands moving with ease and comfort. As the cocoa simmered over the fire, the three of them sat together on the rugs, sipping the sweet, fragrant drink. Clara laughed softly at Emily's exaggerated as she tasted it, and even Luke found himself chuckling, a sound long absent from his own ears. The wind outside howled, snow slapping against the windows, but inside, the cabin was a bubble of warmth, laughter, and something altogether new, hope. Later, they decided to decorate the small Christmas tree Luke had tucked in the corner of the cabin weeks before. It was modest, a few ornaments Emily had crafted herself from twine and pine cones, but Clara approached it with an infectious enthusiasm. She helped Emily hang each decoration with care, occasionally glancing at Luke to share a quiet, meaningful smile. There, Clara said softly, stepping back. The little tree twinkled in the firelight, a symbol of life and renewal in the cozy cabin. Emily clapped her hands, spinning around in delight. Luke felt a lump in his throat. Something about seeing his daughter so carefree, so joyful, filled a part of him he had long thought dead. "Clara, thank you," he said quietly later, as they sat by the fire after tucking Emily into bed. The girl's small form snuggled under a blanket, her breathing slow and peaceful. "I didn't think we'd ever feel this whole again." Clara's eyes softened. "You don't have to thank me," she said gently. "I just wanted to help. And I think I could learn a lot from both of you too." Luke's heart tightened at her words. He had been so guarded, so afraid of letting anyone in, but Clara had already crossed the threshold of his defenses without even trying. There was something about her presence, warmth, honesty, and gentle strength, that made the idea of happiness not just possible, but attainable. Outside, snow fell heavier now, blanketing the frontier in white silence. Luke stepped to the doorway for a moment, glancing at Clara standing nearby, coat and scarf dusted with snow. She had stayed to watch the cabin from the outside, her eyes reflecting the firelight, calm and serene. The contrast between the biting cold and her steady warmth reminded him that the world was still full of possibilities. "Clara," he said softly, his voice carrying in the quiet night. She turned, meeting his gaze, and for a moment, the world felt still. "Would you stay for Christmas?" Clara's lips curved into a small, radiant smile. "I'd like that very much," she replied. The sound of Emily's light snores drifted up from the bedroom, and Luke felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He realized then that Christmas was no longer about the things he had lost, but about the new moments waiting to be shared. Firelight danced across the walls, illuminating their faces, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where laughter, love, and warmth weren't fleeting, but permanent. And outside, the snow continued to fall, wrapping the frontier in silent white, as if the world itself was blessing the beginning of a new family, a new chapter, and the first true Christmas of hope. The next morning, the frontier town glimmered under a fresh layer of snow. Sunlight reflected off the rooftops, making the street sparkle as if dusted with diamonds. Inside the small cabin, the warmth of the fire wrapped around Luke, Clara, and Emily, casting flickering shadows that danced on the timber walls. Emily had woken early, her excitement bubbling over as she tugged at her father's sleeve. "Papa! Papa! Can we go see the Christmas tree in the square?" she asked, eyes wide with delight. Luke chuckled, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He had forgotten how boundless a child's joy could be, how it could brighten even the coldest of mornings. Clara was already dressed, her sky-blue velvet coat snug and scarf neatly wrapped. She smiled as Emily ran past her, leaving tiny footprints in the thin layer of snow that had gathered near the cabin door. "Shall we all go together?" she asked, offering her hand to Luke. He took it hesitantly, feeling a small thrill at the warmth that spread through his fingers, and nodded. Outside, the air was crisp and biting, but the snow sparkled under the early morning sun. Clara led the way, laughing softly when Emily attempted to catch snowflakes with her mittened hands. Luke followed, watching the interplay between them, and couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder he hadn't known in years. The world felt alive again, full of promise. The town square was already bustling. A modest Christmas tree had been set up in the center, decorated with candles and simple ornaments made by the townsfolk. Children ran about, cheeks pink from the cold, laughter ringing through the crisp air. Shopkeepers hung garlands and wreaths, and the scent of baked goods mingled with pine and fire smoke. The frontier town, usually quiet and solemn, now felt like it was wrapped in celebration. Emily's eyes widened as she spotted the tree. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, grabbing Clara's hand and pointing at the sparkling candles. Clara knelt to Emily's level, brushing a strand of hair from her flushed face. "Yes, it is," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth and awe. "And we get to help make it even more special." Luke followed, carrying a small basket of ornaments and pine cones from the cabin. Together, the three of them approached the tree. Emily carefully placed her handmade ornaments, Clara helping her adjust the tiny pine cones, while Luke hung a few larger decorations, smiling quietly as he watched the bond forming between the two. "Papa, look! Clara's helping me," Emily said excitedly, spinning around to hug her. Luke felt a tug at his chest, a warmth that was equal parts pride and gratitude. He had feared he could never find someone to care for both him and his daughter, but Clara was proving that she could fill the empty spaces of their lives with kindness, laughter, and love. After decorating, Clara suggested they visit the other families in town, spreading cheer and small gifts. Emily's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon they were walking through the snow-covered streets, handing cookies, small trinkets, and warm greetings to neighbors. The town seemed to respond to their joy, smiles returned to faces that had grown weary, and laughter replaced the quiet solemnity that had long characterized the frontier winter. Luke noticed the subtle glances Clara would give him, small expressions of concern or encouragement, and he realized just how much he had come to rely on her presence. She was gentle, yet confident, soft-spoken, yet resilient. She had a way of making everyone around her feel safe and valued, and he found himself wondering how he had ever managed without her. As evening fell, the square was lit by lanterns and candles, casting a warm glow over the snow. The townsfolk gathered around the Christmas tree for the small ceremony, a few songs, a short prayer, and the exchange of gifts. Emily held Clara's hand tightly, smiling up at her with trust and admiration. Luke, standing beside them, felt a lump in his throat. He had imagined Christmases without love, without laughter, without hope, but now he realized that this was what it was truly meant to feel like. When the ceremony ended, they returned to the cabin, hands red from the cold but hearts warm. Clara knelt by the fire to help Emily dry her mittens, and Luke set about preparing a small feast with whatever they had, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and a modest stew. It wasn't much, but it was enough, more than enough, because it was shared. As they sat together, the firelight flickering across their faces, Emily leaned against Clara, her small hand resting gently on her arm. "This is the best Christmas ever," she whispered. Clara smiled, brushing Emily's hair from her face. "It's only the beginning, little one," she said softly, and Luke felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the fire. Later, when Emily was tucked into bed, Luke and Clara lingered by the fire. The snow outside continued to fall softly, covering the frontier town in white silence. Clara sipped a small cup of cocoa, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Luke studied her for a long moment, thinking of all the lonely nights he had endured and how unexpectedly she had brought light into their lives. "Clara," he began, his voice low and unsteady. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze with quiet understanding. "Thank you, for coming. For staying, for Emily." Clara's lips curved into a gentle smile. "I came because I wanted to help," she said. "And because I think I was meant to be here. With both of you." Luke felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time, hope. Real hope. The kind that promised not only a Christmas filled with warmth and joy but the possibility of a future they could build together, full of laughter, love, and family. Outside, the snow fell heavier, but inside, the cabin glowed with warmth, light, and the promise of a new beginning. For the first time in years, Luke allowed himself to believe that even the loneliest hearts could find love, even in the coldest winter, and that sometimes, hope could arrive on the doorstep when least expected. The snow fell thicker now, blanketing the frontier town in a pure, glistening white. Lanterns in the streets flickered gently, their warm glow reflected in the snowdrifts. The town square, still decorated modestly with garlands and candles, felt alive with the quiet magic of Christmas Eve. Children laughed as they ran past, their breath misting in the cold air, while townsfolk offered warm greetings and shared small gifts. Inside the cabin, the fire blazed higher, casting a golden glow that danced across the timber walls and illuminated the faces of its 3 inhabitants. Luke stood near the hearth, drying his hands on a worn cloth after preparing the evening meal. Emily, bundled in her cozy layers, was carefully placing the final ornaments on the small Christmas tree, her cheeks flushed with excitement and the warmth of the fire. Clara knelt beside her, adjusting a small candle on the windowsill so that the flickering flame reflected off the frosted glass. The room smelled of roasted vegetables, freshly baked bread, and the faint sweetness of pine from the tree. The cozy cabin, with its worn rugs, wooden benches, and soft blankets, had never felt so full of life. It was more than just a home, it was a sanctuary, a place where broken hearts could mend and hope could bloom. Emily clapped her hands when she finished decorating, stepping back to admire her work. "It's perfect," she exclaimed, spinning around to show Clara and her father. Luke smiled, the lines of worry and loneliness softened by the sight of his daughter's joy. "It is," he agreed quietly, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Clara reached out, taking Emily's small hand in hers. "You did a wonderful job, Emily," she said softly. "This tree, it's magical because of you." Emily beamed, leaning into Clara with trust and happiness. Luke watched the moment unfold, realizing how naturally Clara had woven herself into their lives. She hadn't just brought joy, she had brought healing. As dinner simmered in a small pot on the stove, Clara suggested they take a short walk to enjoy the town's Christmas lights. Emily's eyes lit up at the idea, and she eagerly grabbed their hands. Together, the three of them stepped into the snowy night, the cold air nipping at their cheeks but doing nothing to dampen their spirits. The town was transformed under the falling snow. Garlands hung from windows and doorways, lanterns lined the streets, and children's laughter echoed through the quiet corners. Luke held Emily close, his arm around her shoulders, while Clara walked beside them, her presence a comforting warmth against the winter chill. Emily tugged at Clara's hand, pointing out small details with wide-eyed wonder, candles in windows, tiny gifts hung from the trees, and townsfolk exchanging cheerful greetings. They paused by the large Christmas tree in the square, its candles flickering in the evening wind. Emily's eyes widened in awe, and she pressed close to Clara. Luke placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, glancing up at the twinkling lights. For the first time in years, he felt that the world was full of possibility, that happiness, laughter, and love weren't just fleeting illusions, but tangible gifts waiting to be claimed. A small choir of children began singing nearby, their voices carrying through the crisp air. Emily's face lit up, and she hummed along, swaying slightly. Clara smiled at her, and Luke couldn't help but be drawn into the moment. He had feared that he would never find such joy again, yet here it was, unfolding gently around them. When they returned to the cabin, the snow had settled into a thick, glistening carpet. Luke lit a few candles and placed them on the windowsills, their warm glow reflecting off the snow outside. Clara helped Emily hang a small garland along the mantel, while Luke prepared their modest meal. Though the dinner was simple, roasted vegetables, bread, and a small stew, it felt abundant because it was shared, because the room was filled with love. They sat together, the firelight flickering across their faces, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Emily leaned against Clara, her small hand resting in hers, while Luke watched them, a lump in his throat. The cabin, once quiet and lonely, now echoed with life and connection. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future filled with laughter, warmth, and love. After dinner, they gathered by the fire. Emily's eyes were heavy with sleep, but she refused to close them without first reading a story. Clara read aloud, her voice soft and melodic, weaving the tale through the warmth of the cabin. Luke listened quietly, savoring the sound, the happiness, the sense of home he had long believed lost. When the story ended, Emily was tucked into bed, her small form wrapped in blankets. She whispered a sleepy, "Thank you," to Clara before drifting into dreams. Luke and Clara sat together by the fire, their hands brushing occasionally, eyes meeting in silent understanding. "Luke," Clara said softly, breaking the quiet, all of this, it feels right. I feel like I've found where I'm meant to be." Luke took her hand in his, holding it gently. "I never thought I'd feel whole again," he admitted. "But with you, and Emily. I can't imagine being anywhere else." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the frontier town in a serene white glow. The cabin's firelight spilled onto the porch, illuminating the freshly fallen snow, reflecting warmth and hope. Inside, the small Christmas tree twinkled, ornaments catching the light in tiny reflections, and the cabin seemed to hum with the magic of the season. As the night deepened, Luke, Clara, and Emily sat quietly, savoring the simple joy of being together. The past felt distant, the loneliness of winters gone, replaced by laughter, love, and the comforting embrace of family. They were no longer just a father and daughter, they were a complete family, bound not by circumstance but by choice, trust, and the quiet magic of Christmas. Luke glanced at Clara, then at Emily, and whispered softly, "Merry Christmas." Clara smiled, squeezing his hand gently. Emily, half asleep but still smiling, whispered back, "Merry Christmas." Outside, the frontier lay blanketed in snow, quiet and still, yet inside the cabin, hearts were alight. Firelight flickered over warm faces, laughter had returned, and hope had taken root. This Christmas would be remembered, not for gifts or grandeur, but for the love and connection that had transformed a lonely cabin into a home. In that moment, Luke realized something profound. Family wasn't just about who you were born to, it was about who chose to stand with you, through cold winters, quiet nights, and every challenge in between. And in Clara and Emily, he had found the family he had longed for, the warmth he had needed, and a love that would carry them all forward, through every Christmas yet to come. And so, as snow continued to fall softly outside,